Hey, Navigators. I just want to let you know that the ride you're about to see was shot way before the hurricanes, and I've been down there on my Navi since, so it doesn't look like they were really affected by the hurricane. So the point is that if you were to ride down there now, it would look a lot like the ride you're about to see. All right, enjoy the ride.
Today we're on the road in Pinellas County. We're back in downtown St. Petersburg to ride through some amazingly beautiful and historic neighborhoods located on the waterfront. Hey everybody. So we highlighted downtown St. Pete in a previous video. But on our way there, we rode through the outskirts of some amazing neighborhoods. I promised I'd come back and take a ride through them, and that's what we're going to do. Today we're going to take a leisurely ride around the oddly named Pot Bayou, which borders both Snell Isle and a neighborhood called Old Northeast. Here's a map of what we're going to do. So here's the bayou. Does it look like a coffee pot? I don't think so. And so we'll be driving from Snell Isle over to Old Northeast, and we'll ride around through the streets back and forth and all over, really, checking out the houses. And then we'll finish our ride by coming back over the bridge and down the road bordering the shore of Snell Isle itself. Now, these neighborhoods were created by local legend C. Perry Snell. The C stands for Commodore. Now, that was his name, not his title. And I just love turn-of-the-century names. So before, in the Oldsmar video, we had Ransom E. Olds. And today, we're chatting about Commodore Perry Snell. How cool is that? Oh, you see these statues on our left here? Remember those. We'll get back to those in a bit. Okay, but as we slow, here is a monument to Commodore Perry Snell here on Snell Isle. But why does he deserve such recognition on the isle that bears his name? Well, here's the timeline. Entrepreneur Snell first came to St. Pete in 1899 on his honeymoon with his wife Lillian Allen, who was wealthy from a family inheritance. Now, around that time in 1900, H. Kenyon and his wife sold 40 acres of what would eventually become Snell Isle to Alice Barnard for $200. A year later, using money from Lillian's inheritance, Snell bought a block of property a distance away between 1st and 2nd Avenue. And then 5 years later, he and Lillian moved to St. Pete from Kentucky. 3 years after that, Alice Barnard died. And in 1911, Snell bought her 40 acres from her estate for $2,000. Another 3 years later, Snell and his partner J.C. Hamlet bought another 400 acres of the Barnard property for $67,500. And in 1925, Snell paid an additional $5,000 to another company, Shore Acres Properties Incorporated, in case you want to know, for an easement which included the bridge we crossed over when we drove over Pot Bayou. Pot Bayou. Now that's just like a weird name for this body of water, right? Well, the earliest reference in newsprint comes from an 1889 article in the Tampa Journal, and it just uses Pot Bayou simply as a landmark. So the name was already in play. So some people said that the name came from the shape of the bayou, but I think, personally, you have to be on acid to make that visual leap. So I don't buy that. Other people thought that Snell named the bayou, but that wasn't correct because people found a map from 1882, which was 15 years before Snell ever came to St. Pete, that showed this body of water as Pot Bayou. And you have to understand, in 1882, almost no one lived there. I mean, there were almost no settlers there. So maybe some naval map maker came up with it? In the end, no one knows how it got its name. But we do know it's now surrounded by some incredible homes. Now, I will say that this view may be amazing, but riding down these brick roads with Navi suspension, or lack thereof, it made me feel like my spleen was going to fall out. But I will say it is a natural deterrent to speeding because you would not want to risk your suspension by motorcycle or car by going too fast. Now, apparently these bricks are called Augusta block from Augusta, Georgia. And St. Pete began paving the streets with bricks in 1903, using these bricks that were baked at a higher temperature than the one used for buildings because it makes them resistant to moisture, which is perfect for Florida streets because it's a subtropical climate. Now, these bricks were laid without mortar. They only had sand underneath them, kind of like how we do pavers today. But the bricks are so tightly placed that a piece of paper wouldn't fit between them. Actually, in 1910, St. Pete boasted that it had more brick-paved streets than any other Florida city. And I guess that was worthy of bragging about. One more cool thing, some of the bricks still have the fingerprints of the men who made them more than 100 years ago. Now, one of the things I love about neighborhoods like this that are old and exclusive and wealthy is that they were built before gated communities, so anyone can enjoy them. And as I mentioned in the other St. Pete video, I grew up in St. Pete. And in the economically challenging 70s, many of these homes were not in great shape, and the neighborhood itself was not very safe. It's much different now, of course. These homes are worth a lot of money. This little pizza triangle-sized lot right here has a little sign there. That lot by itself, facing the water, is selling for $3 million. Well, no, $3,050,000. I don't know what the $50,000 is for, but it's over $3 million for that weird-sized lot. As I mentioned before, this Old Northeast neighborhood has these brick streets, and they actually have granite curbs. As far as architecture, it has an eclectic mix of prairie style, colonial revival, bungalow style, Mediterranean revival, and Williamsburg style homes. I mean, that's a crazy mix. You would never see that today with HOAs and cookie cutter homes. So in the early 20th century, during the growth period, there was an influx of new architectural styles, including Art Deco and Art Modern. Now, many of the original structures were built as bungalows and in the craftsman architectural style that was becoming popular at the time. And many homes that were near the water were done in what was called a coastal style. What's interesting is that the Old Northeast neighborhood was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2003. I didn't know you could do that with a neighborhood, but there you go. The Old Northeast started with two subdivisions. One was called Bayshore, and the other was called Bayfront. Early on, Snell added seawalls and sidewalks and a park and trolley lines, and they called this area North Shore, which is interesting because there's a park called North Shore Park, which I've been to many a times starting as a kid to recently, and I never knew that's where the name came from. And in 1925, Snell began work on what he called the Granada Terrace, and that neighborhood required all the homes to be stucco and in an Italian or Spanish style, and only allowing certain color paint. So I guess that was like the first HOA. And you can still see some of these homes that have survived. So now we're heading back. We're going to go back to Snell Isle, and these homes on the shore are really, really beautiful. Again, they're not gated, so these old historic neighborhoods you can just ride through. Everyone seemed really nice as I was riding around, and just the homes are gorgeous. Okay, back to our timeline. In 1925, Snell acquired Hamlet's interest and began dredging the local waters to increase the land size of what would become Snell Isle. It was actually really small, and on high tide it would be underwater, so that wasn't going to work. But confident in his plan, later that year he announced the Snell Isle development, and the resulting lot sale was the largest ever to occur in St. Pete. Its total sales back then exceeded $7 million. Now, unfortunately for Snell, 2 months later, the Florida land boom of the 1920s burst. But Snell would not give up on his vision, and he was the only local developer to continue forward, carrying out every commitment that he made. This applied to the Isle, but also to finishing his home that overlooked Pot Bayou. In 1925, only 39 acres of Snell Isle of the intended 275 acres were above water. And although purchasers were defaulting at an alarming rate, Snell had the capital to keep going. And he filled the streets and parkways of Snell Isle with statuaries and went so far as to build like a diminutive, small-sized Stonehenge in one of his parks. This once spoil island, often submerged at high tide, through dredging that this island almost seemed to appear overnight, and it ended up including clubhouses and golf courses and stately homes. Visiting tourists who became buyers waited in accommodations built on site by Snell. Besides hotels, it included shuffleboard, sunbathing, golfing, fishing. There were concerts in Williams Park and nightly dancing closer to the water's edge at the newly erected $1 Million Pier. Despite the challenges in the local economy, in 1926, Snell broke ground for the Snell Arcade in downtown St. Pete. I talked about this building in the St. Pete downtown episode. Here you can see what it looks like. Now, this amazing building cost about $750,000 and was billed as one of the most beautiful office buildings in the South. It was also one of the most excessive. Snell hired an architect named Richard Kindnell, the same architect that designed the Roylat Hotel, which is now the Stetson College of Law. He designed the Snell Arcade, which is this mixture of architectural styles, with the Mediterranean revival popular in St. Pete in the 20s, but connected with Romanesque and Gothic design as well. Now, the first floor of the arcade included 7 imported statues of Venuses that sat atop pedestals, which may be the same statues adorning the courtyard where his monument now stands. I'm not sure, but it could be, and I told you I'd get back to those statues. Now, the 8-story building, that really cool arcade, had retail and office spaces on the lower floor and residence above it, and it also had a basement that has the cafeteria, which, by the way, was recently purchased for millions of dollars. Just the basement. Anyway, originally the rooftop terrace featured Bob's Spanish Village, an open-air night spot. And what's really funny is that during Prohibition, it became the world's worst speakeasy because music and partygoers could be heard throughout downtown. So the residents and the visitors considered Prohibition more as a suggestion than a law. Now, Snell turned down an offer to sell the building and mortgaged it to help pay for his Snell Isle development to fund the dredging and the streets and the utilities. But later on, he was unable to make good on that mortgage, and he lost the building at the height of the Great Depression in 1933. In 1982, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Hey, can you feel it? That grumbling in your stomach? Yep, it's time to feed the algorithms. Go ahead and hit buttons, like or comment or do whatever. Do subscribe, I don't know, whatever you got to do to make those algorithms happy, because we want more people to enjoy the ride with us. So just take a moment and let's make those algorithms happy. And what's incredible to me is the size of these homes. And I understand why people build really big homes. If you have a lot of money, if you don't invest it, you're going to get taxed on it. So building a $40 million home will save you a lot more money than not building it and getting that $40 million taxed. I'm not saying these homes are worth that much. I'm just saying that I understand why these homes are built and rebuilt. That sort of approach to real estate is just fascinating to me. It's been interesting having grown up in St. Pete, not in this area of St. Pete, and through the decades have visited these neighborhoods off and on. I actually proposed to my wife in one of the churches nearby, so this place, for reasons not related to living here, also has a special place in my heart. But I want to thank you for taking this ride with me, enjoying the homes. If you're ever in the area, please take a ride through. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Please be safe out there on the road. And as always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time.